Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Petty.
And I'm Darren Hodder.
Welcome, everyone, everyone who watches this video. Let's kick it off.
Yeah, so today, Greg and Sheila, we're going to be talking about the Tribble effect and more specifically how RavenBlack tames your WebReports technical debt.
That's quite a mouthful. As I'm the only person here old enough to have seen the original Tribbles Star Trek episodes, maybe you can talk about technical debt, and then I'll explain what we mean by Tribbles.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'm sure most people have heard the term technical debt. And, for a lot of people, that means things like fixing bugs or things on the backlog that your development team wants to ignore. I try to think about it more broadly, right? So for me, technical debt is really any kind of current or future work that would need to be done that isn't actually giving you new value, or it needs to be done just to kind of maintain status quo of what you have or what you've built. So when it comes to like software development and things like content server administration, we tend to think about projects like any project, any development project. Technical debt is unavoidable, um, but there's an opportunity to try to reduce it as you work. But I mean, in reality, most development teams, and I'm guilty of this, it's you're under pressure to get things done, so there's things that get put aside for later, and that accumulates. We tend to think of it as things like, I don't know, bug fixes. I mentioned that, but also things like refactoring code or cleaning up redundant code. There's things that we push to later, but technical debt could also be things like failing to generate decent documentation, or if you're developing something for a multilingual company, just choosing English only and not doing the other languages. And even taking a step further backwards, um, when you look at the whole project and you develop some software, technical debt could even be just failing to get the full user adoption and like achieving that full rollout. So, like I said, it's unavoidable, but everybody, accumulates some sort of technical debt. Some teams are better than
Right.
others at like, chipping some off as they go. But the best of us, we always accumulate typically a
Right.
lot of technical debt with anything we build.
And I guess today we're going to talk about specifically about technical debt accumulated by many of our customers, if not all, particularly if they've been using these products for a period of time, and how we can help with that, both in terms of our services, but specifically today in terms of our tools. And I guess this is something that was on our presentation, but we have these questions here, if you want to run through them, Darren, that establish whether or not you have a technical debt problem, particularly with what we call applications, which is defined as something made up, in this case, of maybe web reports, web forms, workflows, that kind of thing. Why don't you read through those, Darren?
Yeah, for sure. And this isn't a name and shame list. I mean, these are common. This is a reality for pretty much any customer because, like I said, it's unavoidable. Um, and thank you for like quantifying what an application is, especially in the context of this presentation. So first and foremost, do you struggle to quantify the applications on your system? I would imagine most people don't even know the full extent of the applications that have been deployed on their system. Do you know how your custom functionality works? Is there any documentation for your applications? Do the people who built your applications no longer work for you? Were your applications built by multiple different companies or different individuals, especially over, a long period of time? Do you dread software upgrades? Do you have to modify WebReports code just to make them compatible with the new version when you do upgrade? If your users have an issue, or if they need to change or add new features, do you struggle to know where to start and what to do? Do you have performance issues with some of your scheduled web reports? Do your users complain about custom interfaces, classic or smart view, that are sluggish and frustrating?
If you can answer yes to any of these questions, you might have technical debt.
That's right.
Um, and we'll talk to some of that, and specifically the features of our tools that help with that. And just to put the tribbles thing to bed, we had a blog probably last year, and just to read from the blog, in the Trouble with Tribbles, a Star Trek episode from the 60s, a tribble gets on board and seemingly harmless and adorable. The creature quickly multiplies, and soon thousands of tribbles are in every nook and cranny of the Enterprise, and ultimately getting in the crew's way and distracting them from their mission. And that might seem far-fetched, but if we just have a look at what happens in a typical customer, this is my rendition of an application with a few web reports, active views, perspectives, web forms, workflows, typically all linked together and all stored in various folders on your system. And somebody builds one of these and it's successful, fairly easy to build, and they're very happy with it. And then the second year comes around and somebody wants something similar and they build another one. So far, so good. Year 3, we have another requirement, something a little different, and so on. And you have a partner comes in and they know web reports and they build something else for you. Your business users start to find they can use it to build things. And as it goes on, you start to grow your system until what you have today might look something like that. Hopefully not literally, but it can be thousands of objects on your system that you may or may not have any idea, where they are, what they do, and that's not uncommon. And I think it's quite a natural thing to happen. Obviously, Darren and myself are fans of web reports, and we have some culpability being the inventors of web reports in terms of this situation. But it's a fairly natural thing when you have something that's relatively easy to use and very powerful to use. And then you, over a period of time, build this stuff with all the normal aspects of technical debt that Darren was just talking about. So this is not uncommon. The question is, do you have the tools and the expertise to bring it under control? I think it might be useful at this point, Darren, if we just quickly put forward our credentials or our bona fides, or why is it arrogant for us to be making these claims or talking about this or talking about your technical debt? Many of you will know us. We're fairly long in the tooth, in my case, generally. But with these products, we built the first version of WebReports, and our company at the time built WebReports, ActiveView, and all the associated products. We initially did all of the pre-sales, the professional services, and over a period of time, we evolved that. We worked for OpenText, both of us here, for a few years, and ultimately started up RavenBlack. And as RavenBlack, we've been providing audit services, that type of thing, to customers, and ultimately building products. So we had a focus on audits, administration and development support, training, mentoring, that type of thing. And over a period of time, as we got going, we became a technology partner and started sharing and selling the products that we use that have made us successful in helping customers to tame these things. I should say, too, as another part of the web reports, is that part of this technical debt, if we're honest, is that not all of these applications were built to code, or there are a lot of features in web reports that are designed to make it very, very easy to upgrade. And if you're having trouble upgrading with web reports, it might be time to revisit how it was built and some aspects of it. And that's something else we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and I think, we have a lot of expertise. We have a lot of experience, which is great. And experience and expertise definitely counts for a lot. but having the right tools is important too. I mean, something simple like a carpenter can know everything about carpentry, but take away their hammer and their saw, see where they get. And more complex, even the most experienced doctors and surgeons, they need tools like X-rays, MRIs, ultrasounds to get the information that they need. They need to use those tools to put their expertise into practice.
Yeah, and while we're not doctors, we are specialists, I guess. It's a fairly niche what we do. And we were definitely doing this work without the benefit of some of these tools. But along the way, to make it, there's some obvious opportunities we found in terms of improving. And I think part of this is not just creating the tools that to make us more successful and to work faster and more economically, but what we're able to provide now, having helped customers to bring their systems under control, is the tools to continue to manage their applications, both in terms of being better able to develop them and to implement more best practices, but also to be able to support them and manage them and document them and all those kind of things. So I think that's where the application analyzer comes in. We've demoed this tool before, but we've very much demoed it a little bit more from the point of view of a developer and the various things we built in to make development much quicker and more economical. So we're going to move into today to looking at the tool. And I'm going to jump in now into actually demonstrating the tool. Actually, one thing I will say is we're trying to align this around 10 features. It's probably more like 9, but I've managed it up to 10. And this is just to give us a little bit of structure around some of the things that we put into the tool that make this so easy and make us so successful with this. I'm starting off looking at a typical classic view. And the first feature here is the interface itself that we've provided and how well it integrates with Classic Content Server. Our tool is built within Content Server Classic, and it's using WebReports to build it. So it natively runs within this system, and we've provided various links or ways you can get into it. And part of this is that you can dip in or dip out of our application. You can dip in and use some sort of audit functionality and come back out to do other things in Classic or Smart View for that matter. Every container or web report or for various objects, you'll have a link to our software, and it will immediately load in our application. And the first thing I want to talk about is, so I've loaded exactly the same folder that we were just looking at, but using our interface. And you'll see on the left-hand side here, the folder, but in a more development-oriented kind of framework. So you have the ability to drill down, and I'm going to try and compare some of these features to actual medical tools. So this is a little bit like an X-ray if you really stretch the point, in that if you're looking at Classic Content Server, you see this level, you see the sort of outer layer. And then if you want to go any further, you have to actually drill down into this, looking for whatever it is you're looking for. And then if you haven't found what you're looking for, then you have to kind of back out and so on. Whereas with this, we can look at this feature request and document creation, and we're already down to the level of some specific items we might be looking for. We can see the whole picture from top to bottom. Another thing that you might not get in an X-ray is the ability within here to zoom in on things. So we might be able to, within this view, start to type in something to show what we're actually looking for, and we end up now, it's dug through all the noise there and shown us the item in the context of the folders there. So that interface, and there are other aspects of this interface, everything kind of works in the same framework. So whatever you're doing, once you get to know the framework, the features and options of Content Server are all wrapped into this particular framework. But as this framework doesn't produce every single nook and cranny of Content Server, we've also made it so whenever you, for example, you have an object selected in here, there will always be the equivalent of a function menu that takes you into classic Content Server, so you can work in there and do things you want to do in there. As we showed earlier, getting from here into our tool, if you then want to take advantage of some of the features we're showing you, is easy too. Further to that, you can click on the header of our tool and it will give you the framework of Content Server. So if you want to have access to navigate around the system, you can. And again, getting into our tool, whether it's from here or straight in through a function menu, is relatively easy. The second thing I think probably should be the first feature is that we have literally built audits into the tool. So over and above whether or not you're working with partners or us to help you, all throughout the system, we've added in features. So this menu is for features that are built into the analyzer, as opposed to the one on the right, which is in Content Server. So we have a feature, for example, called Audit Web Report Portability. And this is a feature that if you're having trouble with upgrades, it looks for items that might have literal strings and things like that in them that would potentially break in an upgrade. This is identified within the folder that was selected to issues with this and the ability to go in and look at those items. If we actually go into looking at specific applications, we've got a sandbox here we use for testing, so an app that's deliberately got some errors put into it. From here, I can select Run Application Audits, and I can run a variety of different audits. This one actually crawls all of the web reports in that app looking for problems, and it's identified what the problems are, the item that has the issue within it, and it's categorized them, and it's all in a kind of searchable format, so I can look and see this one particular web report has a few different issues in it. A couple of other examples, we've got an audit for live reports within a given area. This one looks for and makes a lot of recommendations around things related to bug prevention, database issues, performance, that kind of thing. One that is not specifically related to an application, but to your system, is a user group recursion audit. And we're building these out. This is a relatively new one. This is identified in our system that we have a group, a kind of a circular reference within the groups on our system. Being able to crawl the groups on your system and identify this is quite a useful part of looking for problems on your system. The audits is a big and automatic thing, and I imagine there are medical tools that do that kind of thing. But I'd like to look now as what I sometimes refer to as the MRI feature. When we came into the tool, into the analyzer initially, we were looking at this setup here. And as you can see, this is a conventional folder setup. It started at a particular point in the system because that's where we initiated it. But we have a very traditional nesting of container objects and objects within them. Exactly what you see when you're looking in Content Server. As we looked at here, this is basically the same framework. But we've provided a number of other different ways of looking at the system. So different slices to use the example that I created. These slices we call aspects. So they're different aspects of your system. And the idea is to be able to look at it without having to dive through folders and search, up and down looking for particular objects, is to look at all the ways that web reports in particular, but not alone, are woven into your system. So in the top section here, we have these are actually more like searches than, so they dynamically create aspects based on search criteria. I'll show a couple of these. This is one where you could actually select attributes of particular web reports. So I'm going to say all web reports that have run audits enabled and that are triggered by a node, for anyone who knows what triggers are. And we'll see it's actually found one such web report. I'll talk a little bit about why you're seeing nested web reports later. So it's identified, and if there were more that met that criteria, they would all be listed here. So it's a custom aspect based on specific criteria in the system. We actually have one here also for users and groups. So we're not just searching for objects. We can select something here where it crawls through the groups on the system and identifies all of these groups and all of their subgroups and all of the users within them in a way that very similar to the very, very old content server setup, only much more useful because you can see the nesting of the groups within here. So that's, again, a very unique aspect. Several of these aspects are not searching as much as we've created relationships so that we can show, for example, all of the applications that have literally been built as content server applications on this system. Here's the sandbox one we saw earlier. And one of the things when you're looking at these aspects, you can always drill down, either clicking on these little thumbtacks is what we call a mount, or double clicking. So when you have these aspects, you can drill down within them in certain cases. So if you were looking at, for example, volumes, we don't show the entire system in an aspect because it would be thousands of objects, but we can show the objects and then allow you to drill down to areas of the system that you want to inspect. A couple of other useful ones. We get into the concept of collections a bit later. Recent items is fairly obvious. Business workspace objects is an interesting one because it really works well in this kind of tree paradigm we've created here, where you can drill down from workspace types to templates to business workspaces. Perspectives is designed to help you with the various perspectives on your system that include web reports widgets. So for example, now we can see for a given perspective, like this one here, that it has several tabs, and for each tab we can see web reports that exist under that perspective. A couple of other ones that are very useful for us when we're trying to tease out where you might have issues on your system. And I'll say this is very much a top-down approach to when we're looking at systems and trying to help tease this stuff out. So where are these things and how do they impact your system? So an example here is we might want to see every web report on your system that's being triggered and what is triggering it. This also allows us then to find out particular folders on the system and to look at them that might have web reports running in the background. I think for a lot of customers have a little realization of how many things are going on in the background with web reports or workflows and so on. Same, we have something for user group triggered web reports. So these are, I think we've got one here. And if we look at it, there's a trigger on a particular group. If someone adds a user to it, it will run this web report. Some other obvious one, scheduled web reports, workflows with web reports, and so on. One of the things this aspect concept supports is you can actually create your own aspects. So in order to use all the other features and things we built into this, we've created quite a lot of these aspects, but in this case, we created one simply by creating a live report and dropping it into a defined folder. We can create a new aspect to look at all the personal workspaces on the system, for example. These aspects are configurable, so there are enough of them that the menu is getting quite long. So we are adding, and you can decide which ones you want on here or not. And we do the same. Some of these are not necessarily useful for auditing, but there are a couple we might turn on. For example, this is one that allows us to look at trace logs. And if we just refresh this, the analyzer, now we have on here a new aspect we're just adding into the product that lets us look at trace logs on the system without actually getting into the server. And it gives us information about the particular trace, the actual various functions that were involved, which web reports were involved here, so that you can figure out if a web report was involved with the problem. And if you need to, you can actually look at the entire trace log. We have other such add-ons and things that we potentially can add on if we need when we're auditing a system, and we're gradually building them all into the application analyzer. Now I'm going to show a feature that I guess I tried to, I think maybe like an angiogram, maybe. I'm really grasping at straws here with the medical instruments now, but this is probably one of the most important features for being able to tame, so to speak, a system. When we're looking at, so when we find web reports in some sort of context, in this case, I'm looking at an application here. A lot of times what we really want to know is how this web report interconnects with other web reports and other objects. And in most applications, as we saw earlier, this particular one, you might find as you dig down through here, there are live reports and web reports. They might be co-located in a folder, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're connected to each other. Every customer and every partner has a different way of organizing these, a different methodology, and we're frequently asked to recommend a naming scheme or an organization scheme. And it, to be honest, varies according to what you're building. And we've never really come up with an overarching scheme that everyone could use. But with the analyzer, you don't really need that, because for any web report you have, in this case, we have an application full of them, we have a feature we can execute, and it has gone through every web report and ActiveView in that application and teased them out into all of the interconnections between the web reports. We can zoom in on, actually, I think I picked it's not the app I mentioned to pick, but it was a good example in itself. I'm going to use the sandbox here. This is a much bigger app anyway. It's based on a real app, and we've just used it for demonstration. This one, again, it's crawled the entire app. It's showing us any other web reports that have no interconnectivity or at the top of a tree. In this case, I can drill down a bit. I'm going to mount one level lower. And the beauty of this as well is when we're looking at this, and there's a lot in here, because it's all in this particular set, we can start to type filter expressions that allow us to dive down into this tree. So if anyone watching this has ever had to do this manually, it could take days to try and work this out. Even the biggest application, we can do this in seconds. I think we did one that was over 1,000 web reports. It took half a minute, but which is a long time for an application, but nonetheless pretty good. As you get down into here, we also have the ability to look at this in other ways. This is kind of a horizontal view. It gives us a slightly different view of the information, and we use that in various opportunities. So showing these relationships is very useful from the point of view of, getting a visual and being able to drill down through these things. But often you might be looking at a particular object out of context. So you've come across it in a folder. And what you don't actually know is where it fits in that overall tree or how it interacts with other objects. So we also have features that allow you to look at and see that a particular object, and this actually works for everything in the system, any object that might have a dependency or a web report that is using it in some way, we can identify. In this case, we can see that this web report is referenced by another one as a constant, and we can then look at that particular web report. So we can actually walk back up the tree and or identify, for example, if we're looking at a folder that happens to be the destination for a web report, we can identify that. It's a very, very useful, particularly if you've got what might be junk and you're trying to work out if it's actually junk or if it's being used somewhere. There's another way that we provide this kind of interactivity, and that's sometimes you're working in the source and you're trying to look at a web report and understand what it's doing and how it works. And within here, you might come across, I'm just going to search for an example here. You find in the source, there's a constant, and it's pointing to some other web report. And rather than coming out and looking on the left and trying to figure out which one of these it is, because the constant names don't necessarily match these objects, we've provided a feature where with a control double click, you can see for this constant what it maps to, and in fact jump to that object. So we can trace from web report to web report just using the source, and that is kind of another way that we're able to map these things out and follow them around. Now, most of these things, these relationships, we show in the left panel, but as this is a multi-dimensional problem, often what we're able to look at on the right-hand side here, which I've kind of neglected, this is all of the metadata for a given object. Some of it is very standard stuff, and some of it is quite unique. So when we look at constants, we don't just show them, but you can actually easily get to the objects if they are objects that are being referenced. The same if a web report has a destination, in this case a folder, we have the ability to go to that folder. And you'll find for all of these objects, you'll have links and things. And so a lot of what we're doing in these situations is following the yellow brick road, jumping between. Here we have, we maybe want to go to the parent of an object. I'm just going to kind of click around here a little bit just to give some examples. We might find this object belongs to a particular app. We want to look at that. So we've provided throughout the application, everything you're looking at, whenever there's a point of interest, something that interacts with this object, we can go and look at that very easily. And you'll notice there are two icons for each of these, anywhere the things that are linked. And the one that's the thumbtack, not to slip into my English terminology, is usually accompanied by one that says open in tab. And those are always going to take you back into classic content server. So when you need to go in and do something that's either not in our tool, or it's a view that you prefer to look at, or features that are quite unique, you can do that. So I've been clicking around a bit here. To move into another feature of this framework, we're down a bit of a rabbit hole here. And so we've provided, similar to a browser, but very much in the context of our own tool, the idea that whether you're changing aspects or you're clicking on different objects within these aspects. These little navigation icons here, this one allows you to refresh the existing aspect. But you'll see here we can actually go back a selection within the aspect. In this case, it's not that useful as there's only 4 objects, or the previous aspect. So as we're going back, you'll see as we go back, we can also go forward again. So we can dip backwards or forward through as we're traversing these multi-linked, multi-dimensional views. And this helps us quite a lot. Despite the power that gives us, we also have an issue in that, of course, even with our massive brains, we can get lost in this and struggle to remember things that we were working on. So another thing we've added to this tool, and I think this would be feature number 6 maybe, is the ability to collect things. And this is not dissimilar to the classic content server collection, but in this case here, we can be looking at and selecting and going through deeply seated objects. We have a feature for any of these objects, you can add it to a collection. In fact, you could, I've selected this object here, start to select other objects at different levels of the tree. And we could further to that, type in and go down to and find objects, select them, look for something else. And gradually, as we're working on these things, select things and add them to a collection. Here I've picked a bunch of things that are in different places in this tree. And rather than having to keep clicking around to find them, I've been gradually cherry picking them, and you'll see we have a collection of 5 objects. From this point, if all I wanted to do was copy them, I can do those things from here very much as you could in a kind of Windows type environment, but I can also mount them. And what I have here now is all of the cherry picked objects in a temporary collection. We allow them to be temporary because sometimes you just want to pull some things together to work on them, and you don't want to leave a lot of technical debt or junk or things laying around the system. So by default, it'll make it temporary. But from there, you can do a few things. So you can here put in my new collection or project Greg. So you can give it its own name. You can also favorite it. And you can change for any collections you create. It's like having multiple groups of favorites. You can pick which one you want to use on a given day. You can make it favorite. You can change them. And once you've created a favorite collection like that, this aspect here, my favorite collection, will always take you to the item that you're currently working on. This is a sort of an overlay feature, but it's extremely useful, particularly for us or for anyone who's working on these sort of multi-dimensional problems. All of the collections you have are selectable, and for that, you can mount all of the collections and look at them and step through them and work with them. For that matter, I have one here that has the objects that I've been looking at in this demo. I think the next thing I'm going to do using this favorite, I'm going to go to, this is a business workspace, and we're looking at it here within our tool, and you'll notice that business workspaces have a lot of useful connective information if they have related workspaces or the workspace type they belong to, the template, and various things. I'm just going to go out and take a look at, this is a smart view. And the example here might be that you're looking to solve a customer or someone has come to you with a problem in this smart view. This is it in classic, and you're looking at it, and you could just invoke the application analyzer on this particular object. So that's the same one I was just looking at. But to jump into here from Classic, so this is designed around this next feature, which I'm calling an ultrasound. When you have an object, you're not kind of looking top down. You're not in the context of other relationships. You have someone, a customer has brought you a specific problem, or we're aware of as part of something we're examining, in this case, is Smart View, and we're trying to tease out of it, what it's connected to and what's going on. So we're looking bottom up at a particular object. And in among all of this metadata that you see, some of it is standard. Every one of these objects will have system data. Everyone will have the ability to add a description to it. But there are some unique things. Because this is a business workspace, we have some information. What we'll also see here is something called object overrides. And for any object in Content Server that has either a perspective or an active view, this section will show up. So right away now I can see that there's a perspective applied here. And of course I can mount it. And now I'm following a chain of events. And from here, I can look at each one of the tabs and the web reports that are associated with it. And of course, I can mount the web report, and now I have a view of the tree of objects connected to that web report. So now I can move into and look at and potentially solve a problem or find out where to add functionality to add a new feature. Again, we can look at it in other ways, just to, as I didn't show this part very well earlier. So that's kind of what I kind of refer to as bottom up, or in these features, a kind of a context specific analysis. We always provide in the context useful tabs here. Here's another example. Perhaps you're working support and a user is complaining that they have a folder on the system that is running very slowly, and they don't remember what it's called, but it has the word, it's something ingestion, like maybe they're scanning things into this folder. I just put a slash in that by mistake. I should just be able to search for the word ingestion anyway. And we say, is it invoice ingestion? Yes, it is. This is selected. And what we see here, this item has a new trigger, which says object WR triggers. So we see this actually has a web reports trigger running on it. And now we can see in context, here's a web report that might be contributing to the slow behavior of this folder. Now, working from here, I want to get into the last point on this list of 10. All of these things we've been looking at here are, we're looking at the actual objects, where they live, how they interconnect, that type of thing. But another dimension to this whole thing we work on is the, I guess you could say, time dimension. What happened and when did it happen? And for that, we have some useful parts of this tool. For example, some of this built-in functionality that you have in Content Server, for example, audits, audit events. Here I'm talking about audit logs. You can always go into Content Server and look at audits, but we've built this in a way that now for any object, you get some initial view of some of the most recent events, but you can also fairly quickly and easily go in and look at, for example, particular user login or particular types of events. And it does this very, very quickly and easily. So that's giving us now, when we're looking at, okay, there's a problem here. Sometimes the easiest way to figure out what the problem is what changed? Was there a problem with this before? Who messed with this? I see Darren Hodder's on here, so that would be a probable suspect. Besides this audit event capacity, we also have the ability, as you can on Content Server, to look at versions. But what we've also added is when you're looking at these versions, you can very quickly do a diff and start to look at what, if anything, changed here between these two versions. By the way, that's also built in when you're looking at any source. Of course, any of the source objects, you can do diff through there as well. Part of the benefit of us doing this in our tool, as opposed to going to various pieces of content server and looking around, is that we've made the ability to load these things in the tool completely equivalent whether you're looking at users and groups or looking at objects, or for that matter, anything else. For example, trace logs, you'll notice, was managed in the same framework. So here, if I actually wanted to go in and look at, and I won't look at Darren's path, I'll look at my own here. I can mount that user, and now I'm looking at this particular user and contextual information about that user. For that matter, I can even go up and look at, okay, here's the business administrators group. I can stack back up this tree. I can look at it if I want to. Whatever I need to know about that, I can step back. I'm looking at this object again. And when I'm looking at Greg, I can also see what he's been up to as well. So here I could now, and by the way, I actually use this on myself, because if I've been working on something and I have actually lost my place, or I don't remember what I was looking at, I can actually use this to go back. We've got some larger groupings, and for that matter, you can just look at things like create and add version. And I can now see for really as many events as I want to look at, in this case 500, everything I've been up to. And when I did it, I can sort by a particular object, which gives me an idea of everything I did with that particular object. So this is actually quite powerful. And again, it's built-in functionality to content server, but our deep integration to content server allows us to really leverage that data in a framework that is universal for everything we're working in. So you don't have to know which corners of content server to look at in order to have success. So just to review the 10 features we're mentioning here. First of all, the interface itself and the way we've designed it adds a great deal of efficiency and economic improvement to how long it takes us to look at these things, because of the way we've structured the interface and everything is kind of universally within that same paradigm. The second thing is the MRI effect, the ability to look at different slices of the system, so not just drilling up and down through folders, in order to see what's happening and where it's happening. In audit, I'm talking here not about the audit logs, but about we've built in some automated functions to look at groups of objects and identify issues automatically. We have the ability to look at whole trees of web reports and their relationships, and being able to navigate up and down trees very easily. We have the ability to look at an object where we don't have some overall overarching context, and find out what connects to it and where it fits in that context, and to trace all of the tentacles or the other bits and pieces that it links to. Content server is just a maze of links, and we make all of the links for a given object visible to help with that context. And because following all these trails can be quite difficult, we've a system of breadcrumbs, so you can find your way back out of these rabbit holes or back down the rabbit holes as you need, as well as the ability, as you're on that journey, to park things that are important that you want to come back to later. Because we manage users and nodes in the same framework, we can follow these trails from objects to users and so on. And finally, the way that we've implemented audit logs and version tools allows us to look at not just at these things as they sit in the system and in place, but what was the history? What was the history of a given node or a given user? what happened, when did it happen, and really also to look in time at the differences in the source of an object over a period of time. I will add to this one honorable mention, which is that through that whole process of analysis, we've made it possible, as I showed briefly, when you're looking at objects to add descriptions, clicky, add notes as you're working through to the objects. And that enables us, when we're looking at a particular application or a particular folder, I'll just pick our sandbox to finish up with here. We can select documentation and pull together documentation for everything we've learned and identified during the process of audit. So now we can see in this example all of the nested folders. We can also have it generate documentation for all of the web report trees, and we can bring that to the customer and store it, print it if needs be, or save it in a PDF. And that kind of pulls all of this together, but it didn't fit neatly into 10 bullets. And that brings us to a close. Darren, you want to say anything in closing?
No, that was great, well under time. And I don't see any questions in the queue right now. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much for taking us through that.
Yeah, and we've listed here, as usual, our typical coordinates. We have a YouTube channel. This will be on, or maybe where you found it, RavenBlack Technical Services. Web Report Experts is a domain that will take you to all of our data sheets, and our website's full of good information and stuff. You can reach out to us at either that number or that email address, or for that matter, I'm gpetty@ravenblackts.com. And you're D. Hodder at RavenBlackTS.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.